Hey everyone, I'm Joey, and today we're going to take a quick look at the Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. I wanted to do a quick first impressions video before my actual review. I know that especially with a big release like this, the hype train can go into full overdrive, and I tend to take a more measured, critical approach in my videos, and thought it would help for anyone deciding whether to buy this or not. Because from everything I've seen in my testing, I think expectations need to be tempered, as my expectations were higher than what this device can actually do right now, and I'm still seeing comments and threads with those same expectations, from a performance perspective at least. Just as a quick heads up, I'm getting over a bit of a cold still since coming back from CES. So this is going to be a no face, just audio video, and if I sound a little bit off, it's just due to the cold. For my regular viewers, you know that I wasn't too happy with the previous model, the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. The buttons were all in the wrong place, the device wasn't really comfortable, the buttons were really small, and it just wasn't a fit for me. Despite it not being for me personally, it was an extremely popular handheld, and now we're back with its successor. So I want to thank Retroid for sending this out to me for review, despite all of that. And as usual, they've had no input in what I say, and they haven't seen this video ahead of time. I'll leave a link in the description to their website where you can order this if you'd like. I have to say, they sort of nailed all of my criticisms with the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus in this Retroid Pocket 4 Pro. The buttons are in the proper spots here, they're proper sized and larger than before, and the comfort is, well, it's mostly the same. The comfort is basically the only thing that hasn't really particularly changed. I did a video previous to this titled Before You Buy, and I provided some thoughts there, along with a deeper dive into the specs, pricing, add-ons, colors, and everything to do with the 4 Pro. So to avoid repeating all of that all over again, I suggest that you watch that video first, especially if you're not too familiar with this device or the previous one. Think of this video as Season 2 of a show. You're going to be lost without Season 1. Although I was wrong about a few things performance-wise in that video, and we'll talk about that later on. But the general consensus in the community, and I agree, is that there is a bit of a lack of comfort and ergonomics for the 3 Plus in longer play sessions, and that has definitely carried over into the 4 Pro. It's hard to put a number on it, but I'd say if you're going to be playing anything with the sticks for more than an hour or so, I would consider buying the grips as well to help with that comfort, or you might run into hand cramps and all of that like I've been experiencing. I think for D-pad only play, you could be fine without for longer, but with the power of this device, you'll likely be using the sticks a lot more than the D-pad. On the topic of controls, the D-pad is actually the same D-pad from the previous 3 Plus, their 2S, and AYN's Odin 2. However, it's definitely stiffer. Comparing the two directly side by side with the 2S's D-pad on both the metal and plastic versions, and it's looser and easier to use than the 4 Pro is, which was a weird thing to notice. It's still a very good and great D-pad, and one of the best, but I do miss that extra looseness, as it's just better for me. It's a weird change that I'm not sure why it was made. The sticks are directly from the 2S, or more popularly, the Odin 2. These are fantastic Hall sticks, with a nice range of motion, and I'm super happy to see them here. I will say that depending on how you hold this device, they can be a bit awkward to use at the bottom. And also, I did find myself hitting the right stick and left stick with my thumb occasionally, just due to the proximity of the buttons and the D-pad if I held the device like I usually want to hold it. Instead, you sort of have to hold it like you're barely holding it, with your fingers flaring outward, if that makes any sense at all. It's definitely not the way that I usually like to play games, and I found it to be a bit awkward. Overall, I think this will be a person-to-person thing, but for me, I've been having trouble playing this for longer periods of time without hand cramps, and so I wouldn't consider this to be completely ergonomic or really comfortable, but honestly, that's as far as my negatives go for the actual ergonomics and comfort of this device in first impressions. And it's not something that I was really shocked by, because the design of this is the same as the 3 Plus, and I had those same concerns with the 3 Plus as well. A new addition here is the fan, and that can be turned off, or my personal preference is quiet mode, which is inaudible. But the problem with that is you can't do high performance mode and quiet mode. So you hear the fan the entire time if you want to get the most out of this device, which, after testing, is an absolute necessity if you really want to play any PS2, GameCube, or Wii games. So this is a completely different experience than something like the Odin 2, which had enough power to brute force at performance mode with quiet fan enabled. For this device, I have to actually hear the fan. And it's loud. It's obnoxiously loud. You can barely hear the game in sometimes when you have the fan on. I mentioned it before, but we're skipping every platform up to PlayStation 2 since it can play all of those at full speed with no issue. So in this video, let's take a quick look at PS2, GameCube, Wii, and Switch. I'm purposely leaving Vita off here, as the emulator is in just too early of a stage right now, and not something that I want to devote time to, as showing something running well for 30 seconds gives you the wrong idea of how playable Vita is right now. For how I personally like to test things, I like to do no setting changes at all, and I'm going to be using NTSC ROMs here. Just boot up and play. I like to mimic the user experience of someone who just wants to turn this on and play, because that's how I like to do things. Now, the main difference here is I'm not going to be using the emulators that Retroid suggests when you first boot the device, and I'll be using the emulators that I've been using and that are in all of my setup videos, as well as the guide that I'll be creating for this device specifically. Retroid's built-in emulators are out of date and old, and they won't give you the best experience possible, which for this device you're absolutely going to need. So unfortunately, this is where the 4 Pro started to not meet my expectations, and I kind of have to rein in a lot of what I had thought in my previous video, as I was just wrong. I can't properly call this a device that can play PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Wii, and most of their catalogs, at the very least not at full speed. It can definitely do PS2, but it's closer to 30 FPS and using native resolution, although you will see quite a bit of frame drops and dips depending on the game. But with most PS2 games running at 60 FPS on original hardware, this isn't doing that or anywhere close. I've tested a bunch of games so far, and I've been pretty disappointed in all of them on PS2. It's definitely possible that my expectations were set too high coming in, as I wanted this device to be the native resolution PS2 device, in contrast to the Odin 2. But it's not, in my opinion. So using Aether SX2 3668 here, and obviously the emulator is not finished or being actively developed anymore, and that's holding it back quite a bit. The Odin 2 can brute force all of this and run games like Simpsons Hit and Run at a 6 times resolution without sweating. But the 4 Pro can't do native at full 60, and sticks to 50-ish FPS throughout. And this same scenario continues to other games as well, although most of them are struggling to get to that 30 FPS mark or staying in that range. Now, obviously, these are 2 different price brackets, 2 different devices, and all of that. But the point I'm trying to make here is that I just can't call this a PS2 device. So you should know what to actually expect here, and that's basically half of the PS2 original performance in frame rate, which for a lot of people might be fine, but for my purposes of calling this a PS2 device, I don't think it adds up. Realistically, you're going to be referencing a compatibility spreadsheet quite a bit, and I'll post that in the description. It's going to help you with settings and how to get certain games running that just won't out of the box as the community tries more and more games. I would expect to make a lot of tweaks, setting changes, and all of that if you're planning on playing any PS2 at all. And that was everything I was trying to avoid when I had my hype in overdrive for this device. Now, GameCube and Wii are a bit better on this front, and the Dolphin emulator is actively being developed and constantly getting updated. I've tested quite a few games on Wii and GameCube as well, and as much as I'm not seeing the performance that I had hoped for, it is still a really good device for performance for GameCube and Wii. Don't get me wrong, all of these games play a lot better than the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus did, and for only $50 more than what that was going for. So this is a bit of a steal, but it just isn't that generational leap that I was looking for in another product or update. This is more of a decent improvement, but nothing really earth-shattering. Definitely not the same as going from an Odin Lite to an Odin 2, for a quick example. GameCube games, however, do run quite a bit better than PS2 does, and same with Wii. So I'm comfortable in saying that at the very least, this is definitely a GameCube and Wii device at native resolutions. Although, there are still some games that just won't be in that list. F-Zero is a quick example, and I was pretty shocked to see that it just does not run well here, and when I enabled dual core to get that to run better, it was crashing Dolphin quite a bit. So you have to make a comparison between not running well or crashing, and I don't like either of those choices. Overall, I came into this expecting the 4 Pro to just do a lot better performance-wise, and I'm left sort of feeling a little bit deflated in what it can actually do, and I'm going to take ownership of that because I was partially swallowed in by the hype myself, and I was thinking this was more performant than it actually was. And some of those comments and threads that I'm still seeing on Reddit are still thinking the same that I thought before I got this device. So I want to temper those expectations quite a bit. Because I think for most people, you should temper those expectations. Because coming from a 3 Plus or any T618 device to these types of improvements is a big change, but it's just not as big as I was expecting or I was hoping. And if I had to put myself in the shoes of someone who has a 3 Plus and is considering this, I can't say for certain that I would say this upgrade is worth the $200. I think in my mind, if I was in that scenario, I probably wouldn't be upgrading to this. Now, there has to be a ceiling, unfortunately, and in this case, the ceiling is Nintendo Switch. It's just not there. This is a Mali chip with no custom drivers, and Mali is just behind in Yuzu for development right now. I would consider Switch just completely off the menu here, as this isn't the right device for it. Don't get me wrong, you can get the regular indies playing here and smaller titles and all of that, but you won't get full speed on the ones that most people care about. I want to just quickly mention as well that an issue that shows in this video that you might have noticed, and that's the green tint on the display, and that's already been solved by an over-the-air update that will be coming to retail units before launch. So don't worry about that if you see that throughout the video, it shouldn't be present on any of the devices that you get at retail. Overall, I think that this is an absolutely good device at this price. There's no question at all. At only $50 more than the 3 Plus, this is an easy purchase for anyone that has a set $200 budget, plus shipping, and doesn't already have a T618 device. I think people will be happy with this, and I think we really have a good handheld here. However, I do think people need to be aware and temper the hype just a bit on performance, and that goes for myself included. As a quick thought for comparison between this and the Odin 2, I don't really think there is one. So of course, the Odin 2 is bigger, the 4 Pro is smaller. That's a major difference on top of the price, of course. But if you're someone that's at all asking the question which one you should buy, and you legitimately have no pricing concerns, it's going to be the Odin 2 hands down. It's simply better overall, but again, it's more expensive. I really don't think anyone with an Odin 2 should be purchasing the 4 Pro. It doesn't make sense in any situation that I can think of. If you're expecting this to be a smaller Odin 2 that can still play the games the Odin 2 can, then let me squash that right now by saying that just isn't the case here. But I do think that if you're someone that just wants to boot up a device and pick up and play without tweaking, the extra money for the Odin 2 might make more sense for you, especially if you're a parent or someone with a limited playtime. Take that into consideration here when making a decision. However, for those of you not interested in Switch emulation and have a hard budget cap, wanting something a bit smaller, less ergonomic, and just looking for some of the PS2, GameCube, and Wii catalogs with tweaking and setting changes and all that, The 4 Pro looks like it could be the perfect fit for basically all of that, and it slots nicely into the pricing tier that we just previously only had one answer for, and that was the Odin Lite. It's nice to have another option here, especially a bit smaller. I was initially hoping for a Flip 2 with all of these specs, but I think at this point, I would rather they wait for the next chip before doing that. And that's as best as I could summarize this entire video for anybody that knows my love of the Flip 2. That's going to be it for this one. Like I said, quick first look, and I'll work on a final review that will test everything else. So HDMI, other games, and the usual things. However, my next video will be a setup guide for this, since it's shipping in a few days, and I want to help you out since you're going to be getting them in your hands quite quickly. Don't forget to like and sub to help the channel grow, and hope you all have a good one.